What if your Switch library was secretly hiding some of its best games in the deepest corners of the eShop? Today, we're digging up 30 Nintendo Switch hidden gems that totally deserve a permanent spot on your home screen. Kicking things off with a banger. CrossCode is what happens when a SNES action RPG and a modern MMO have a ridiculously talented pixel art baby. You play as Leah, a mute heroine trapped inside a fictional online game, dashing around a chunky top-down world. Combat feels super kinetic. You're swapping between melee slashes and twin-stick style energy shots, juggling enemies while dodging screen-filling attacks. Then the game drops you into these huge Zelda-style puzzle dungeons that make you feel like a genius 1 minute and totally stumped the next. Between the skill trees, elemental powers, and gear upgrades, there's a ton of build tinkering if you love min-maxing. It's one of those games where you think, I'll just finish this quest, and suddenly it's 3 hours later and you're still chasing rare drops and secret chests. If you miss the golden age of 16-bit RPGs, this one absolutely scratches that itch. Sliding over to something more laid back and brainy, Tangle Tower is a cozy murder mystery that feels like a mashup of Professor Layton, a cartoon series, and a slightly unhinged escape room. You're tagging along with Detective Grimoire and his wonderfully sarcastic partner Sally as they investigate a bizarre case, a woman seemingly murdered by a painting. The whole thing plays out in this weird, twisting mansion where every room is packed with clues, odd contraptions, and wildly suspicious family members. The hand-drawn art is gorgeous, characters are fully voiced, and the writing is surprisingly sharp and funny. You'll actually want to hear every line instead of mashing through dialogue. Puzzles range from simple logic tests to mechanical contraptions that make you feel very clever when they finally click. It's not a long game, but it absolutely nails that curl up with a good mystery on a rainy evening vibe.
Sally, check those plants for clues.
Is soil a clue?
And if you're in the mood for something way nastier, Slain Back from Hell is basically a love letter to old school heavy metal album covers that someone turned into a brutal 2D action platformer. You're a grumpy warrior hacking through gothic castles, blood-red skies, and piles of skulls, timing your sword swings and parries instead of just button mashing. It's punishing in that classic one more try way. Enemies hit hard, traps are everywhere, and stages can feel like gauntlets designed by a particularly angry game designer. But when it clicks, it's incredibly satisfying, especially with that ridiculous metal soundtrack screaming in the background. The pixel art is outrageously detailed, with giant demons and twisted architecture that look ripped straight off a 90s CD booklet. It's not the friendliest game on this list, but if you secretly wish Castlevania went full metal band merch, this scratches a very specific itch. Sometimes a hidden gem doesn't need flashy combat or huge worlds. It just needs vibes, and Golf Story has them in spades. This is a quirky RPG where golf is basically your entire lifestyle. Instead of grinding XP on monsters, you're leveling up your swing, tackling weird side quests, and helping eccentric townsfolk who might ask you to chip balls at moles or putt your way out of petty drama. The writing is hilarious in that very dry, very Australian way, and the story leans into the charm of being an underdog golfer trying to prove yourself. What surprised me most is how genuinely satisfying the golfing mechanics are. Clean impact sounds, snappy timing windows, and courses that slowly get more chaotic and creative. It's a game you can chill with for 10 minutes or lose an evening to without meaning to. If you love RPGs but want something cozy and low pressure, this one's a total standout. If you ever wished someone would lash up classic Doom, Hexen, and a little bit of Wolfenstein into one explosive retro FPS, Project Warlock is your jam. Everything about it screams 90s shooter energy, from the chunky pixel guns to the relentless enemy waves. You play as a mysterious warlock blasting through dozens of handcrafted levels filled with secrets, trap rooms, and old-school keycard hunts. But here's the twist, it actually has modern progression layered on top. You're upgrading spells, unlocking perks, and customizing your arsenal in a way the classics never had. Each chapter has its own theme: frozen wastes, gothic castles, industrial nightmares, keeping the pace fresh. What makes it unique is that it isn't trying to be ironic or meta. It genuinely loves the era it's inspired by, and that sincerity makes it ridiculously fun. If your heart beats faster at the sound of shotgun pumps and crunchy enemy jib animations, this is pure retro candy.
And enter hell to conquer it. Yeah.
On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, Melatonin feels like a dreamy hug disguised as a rhythm game. Imagine rhythm heaven, but instead of wacky mini-games, everything takes place inside surreal dream sequences about social media anxiety, late-night snacking, retail therapy, and literal daydreaming. Each stage syncs perfectly with a lo-fi, chill-hop style soundtrack, and the rhythm cues blend into the animations instead of relying on flashy indicators, which makes the whole thing oddly immersive. It's challenging, but in that cozy, try again with better timing way instead of being punishing. The pastel art direction is gorgeous, and every dream theme tells you a little something about the character's internal struggles without ever getting too heavy. It's one of those games you play with headphones on, forgetting the world for a bit. If you love rhythm games with personality and you want something that feels comforting instead of stressful, Melatonin is an underrated delight. Flynn, Son of Crimson is one of those games that feels instantly familiar in the best possible way, like opening a long-lost SNES cartridge and somehow discovering it still slaps in 2025. It's a crisp 2D action platformer where every hit, dash, and jump feels handcrafted for satisfaction. You play as Flynn, a red-haired hero bonded to mystical crimson energy, and your abilities evolve from simple sword strikes to flashy combos, elemental weapons, and magical blasts. The pacing is fantastic. Short levels, tight combat encounters, hidden collectibles, and occasional big boss battles that test your reflexes without ever feeling unfair. The art style is a huge standout, vibrant pixel art with lush environments and expressive animations that make the world feel alive. Honestly, this is one of those games I booted up thinking I'd play for 20 minutes, and suddenly it was 2 AM and I was hunting down every last secret. If you love Shovel Knight style precision, this one deserves your attention. Don't let the goofy character models fool you. Super Mega Baseball 4 is one of the most addictive and surprisingly deep sports games on the Switch. It nails that perfect middle ground between arcade fun and real baseball strategy. Pitching has an awesome risk and reward tension. Batting feels punchy, and the fielding animations are fast and smooth enough to keep every inning exciting. You can tweak difficulty with the ego system, meaning newbies can ease in while veterans crank it up for a real challenge. There's a massive roster of legendary players, team customization, franchise modes, and just enough silliness to keep it all approachable. What's wild is how quickly a match goes from chill exhibition to I'm screaming at the TV because I refuse to sub out my exhausted pitcher. If you normally skip sports titles, this one might surprise you. It's colorful, polished, and way more charming than a baseball game has any right to be. If your heart beats for NES-era Castlevania, Odallus the Dark Call is basically someone handing you the perfect nostalgia sandwich. You play as Haggis, yes, Haggis, a veteran warrior setting out to rescue his son while slashing through demonic caverns, haunted forests, and cursed ruins. Levels are structured like classic action platformers, but with a modern twist. Secret paths, hidden relics, and upgrades encourage exploration instead of just running left to right. Combat is chunky and deliberate, with throwable weapons, heavy attacks, and boss fights that feel like they crawled straight out of 1988 in the best way. The game has that gritty pixel aesthetic that makes everything feel dangerous and mysterious, but it never becomes unfairly punishing. It's short, sweet, and incredibly replayable. The kind of retro-inspired gem you start for nostalgia and end up finishing because the gameplay just feels right. For old school fans, it's comfort food with a dark fantasy twist. Unpacking sounds simple on paper. You're literally taking items out of boxes and placing them in a new home. But it's honestly one of the most emotional and quietly brilliant games on the Switch. Each level is a new stage of someone's life, told entirely through the objects they bring with them. No text, no dialogue, just clues hidden in stuffed animals, kitchen tools, posters, and little personal treasures you place around the room. The genius is how interactive storytelling blends with pure, satisfying organization. You can rearrange shelves for that perfect aesthetic, experiment with layouts, or just relax to the soothing sound design that makes every object feel tangible. And without spoiling anything, there are moments where the placement rules actually tell you something about the character's struggles or relationships, and it hits way harder than you'd expect from a game about unpacking boxes. It's cozy, meditative, and one of the most unique narrative experiences on the Switch. If Lovecraft meets Bloodborne but in pixel art sounds like your thing, Morbid: The Seven Acolytes is absolutely worth diving into. This grim action RPG throws you into a decaying world crawling with grotesque creatures and grotesquer bosses, the titular Acolytes, each mutated by eldritch forces. Combat leans into a Souls-like rhythm, stamina management, careful dodging, and reading attack patterns. But it's not all doom and gloom. There's deep character customization, from runes and weapon mods to blessings that change your playstyle. The world building is legitimately fascinating, revealed through environmental details and cryptic NPCs rather than info dumps. What I love is how the pixel art somehow manages to be both beautiful and disturbing, especially when bosses sprout extra limbs or shift into new phases mid-fight. It's challenging, atmospheric, and scratches that grim but satisfying itch for players who want something dark yet approachable on the Switch. Another Code Recollection is a lovingly rebuilt collection of two cult classic adventure games, the DS's Trace Memory and the Wii's Another Code R, now revamped into a modern, fully 3D mystery experience. You follow Ashley Mizuki Robbins, a teenager uncovering the truth behind her family's past on a remote island filled with puzzles, secrets, and surprisingly emotional moments. The remake updates literally everything: voice acting, exploration, puzzle interactions, visuals, all while keeping the introspective, story-driven tone fans loved. It's slower paced in a comforting way, letting you wander, examine objects, and piece together clues at your own rhythm. The puzzles feel tactile and thoughtful without being frustrating, and Ashley's journey hits harder with the new presentation. For players who love narrative-first adventures, this is like curling up with a good mystery novel, except you're the one solving each twist. It's gentle, heartfelt, and a polished revival of two overlooked gems. Monster Train is what happens when someone looks at Slay the Spire and says, yeah, but what if it were absolute chaos on a literal train barreling through hell? This deck builder is fast, wild, and way more strategic than it first appears. Battles take place across 3 vertical floors of your train, and enemies climb upward each turn, forcing you to juggle unit placement, spell timing, and synergies on the fly. You can mix clans like demonic tanks, plant-based healers, or icy spellcasters to create absurd combos that snowball into unstoppable engines. Runs feel dramatically different every time, thanks to artifacts, mutators, branching routes, and hero units that evolve as you go. What makes it addictive is how quickly a run goes from barely surviving to my units are gods now, and suddenly you're laughing as entire waves melt before they even move. It's stylish, replayable, and one of the best card battlers the Switch has. If Metroid had a house cat mode, it would be Gato Roboto, a pure, joyful, black and white mini Metroidvania where you play as a tiny cat piloting a chunky mech suit. The premise is adorable, but the gameplay is shockingly tight. Your mech gives you missiles, dashes, and chunky blaster fire, but what's fun is how often you're forced to hop out as the fragile little cat to squeeze through vents or dodge hazards. It creates this great rhythm: armored power 1 minute, delicate platforming the next. The world is compact and perfectly designed, meaning exploration never drags. You're constantly discovering upgrades or unlocking shortcuts. Boss fights are energetic without being punishing, and the writing leans into charming, deadpan humor. The monochrome pixel art gives everything a stylish retro feel while keeping readability crystal clear. It's short, sweet, and one of those games that leaves you smiling the entire time. Pure hidden gem energy. Huntdown is 80s action movies distilled into a gloriously explosive run-and-gun shooter. Think Contra meets RoboCop with a dash of neon-soaked Saturday morning cartoon absurdity. You pick from 3 bounty hunters, each with their own personality and weapons, and blast your way through gangs that feel ripped straight out of VHS fever dreams. Every level is packed with hand-drawn pixel art, environmental traps, and set pieces that make each mission feel like a mini blockbuster. The gunplay is incredibly satisfying, sliding into cover, swapping weapons, lobbing grenades, and melting bosses that all have wildly over-the-top introductions. What really elevates it is the presentation. Voice lines, music, animations, everything feels premium and self-aware without falling into parody. It's challenging but fair, making it perfect for players who love high-energy arcade shooters with attitude. If you're craving something stylish, punchy, and packed with personality, Huntdown delivers in spades.
Making living unhealthy.
Harvestella is Square Enix asking, what if we mixed a life sim farm game with a full JRPG storyline and then sprinkled in just a little existential crisis? The result is a surprisingly rich hybrid where you're tending crops, befriending townsfolk, cooking meals, and then diving into dungeons to fight monsters influenced by a seasonal apocalypse called Quietus. Days pass with that soothing loop of planting, crafting, exploring, and upgrading, but the story is much deeper than most farming sims, dealing with identity, time, and loss in ways that sneak up on you emotionally. Combat feels snappy, letting you swap between multiple classes like Mage, Shadow Walker, and Assault Savant, each with its own flair. And the art style? Pure JRPG comfort food. Soft lighting, magical forests, cozy homes, mysterious crystals. It's perfect for players who want a relaxing farm routine and a full adventure with bosses and plot twists. A slow burn, but incredibly rewarding once it clicks.
Together to face momentous ordeals.
Gunman Clive HD Collection might look tiny compared to modern releases, but don't let that sketchbook aesthetic fool you. This is one of the smoothest, cleanest action platformers on Switch. You're running, jumping, and shooting through Wild West themed levels that feel like Mega Man collided with a dusty old notebook. The sepia hand-drawn art style is instantly eye-catching, and the controls are pixel perfect, making every dodge and shot feel intentional. Both games in the collection are short but densely packed with clever enemies, shifting perspectives, wild set pieces, and surprisingly tough boss battles. What I love most is how confident it is in its simplicity. No grinding, no filler, just tight level design and crisp combat from start to finish. It's the kind of game you can beat in one sitting and then immediately replay because the speedrun potential is chef's kiss. A small package, yeah, but an absolutely delightful one. Bad North is minimalist strategy brilliance, a tiny, clean, watercolor-looking game that hides a surprising amount of tension beneath its gentle visuals. You're commanding small squads of soldiers across procedurally generated islands, fending off Viking invasions that come crashing in from all sides. Battles are real-time with a pause option, letting you reposition troops, anticipate attack angles, and manage retreats in a way that feels elegant instead of overwhelming. Losing units hurts because squads can die permanently, creating that addictive one more island loop where every decision matters. Upgrading archers, pikemen, and infantry gives you just enough customization to form personal strategies without falling into micromanagement hell. Despite the soft art style, the stakes feel intense. Watching an island burn because you misread the enemy boats is genuinely heartbreaking. It's short, stylish, and endlessly replayable. Perfect for players who love strategy but want something relaxing and bite-sized instead of a 50-hour commitment. Blue Fire is one of those games that makes you go, wait, how is this not more famous? It's a fast, fluid 3D action platformer that feels like Hollow Knight and Zelda decided to create a moody parkour baby. You play as Umbra, a tiny warrior zipping through a gloomy, atmospheric world filled with ruined castles, floating arenas, and masked spirits. The movement is the real star here. Double jumps, air spins, wall runs, precise dashes, all tuned so tightly that you start chaining them together like a platforming ninja. Combat is quick and stylish, with unlockable abilities and customizable spirits that tweak your build. But the void challenges steal the show. Brutal parkour gauntlets that test your timing and patience in the most satisfying way possible. It's challenging without being punishing, and the world is just mysterious enough to keep pulling you forward. If you crave movement-based platformers with real bite, this is a must-play that slipped under way too many radars. Going Under takes the soul-crushing chaos of unpaid internships and wraps it inside a chaotic roguelike dungeon crawler, and somehow makes the whole thing hilarious. You play as Jackie, a marketing intern at a failing tech startup where the dungeons are the ruins of other failed startups. Enemies are goblins wielding smartphones, flaming office equipment, angry drones, and literal manifestations of broken business models. Weapons? Whatever's lying around. Keyboards, staplers, giant pencils, beanbag chairs. If you can swing it, it's viable. The humor is sharp, poking fun at corporate culture, startup nonsense, and tech bro optimism gone horribly wrong. But underneath the jokes, the gameplay is legitimately polished. Each dungeon has unique mechanics, upgrades encourage goofy builds, and runs feel fast and unpredictable. There's also a surprising amount of story about ambition, burnout, and trying to stay hopeful in a world that treats interns like disposable potions. It's witty, stylish, and addictively chaotic. For JRPG fans who love branching paths and weird experimental design, Romancing Saga 3 is a treasure. The remaster preserves the original's gorgeous sprite work while smoothing everything out with modern UI updates and a great soundtrack refresh. What makes this game special is freedom. You pick from 8 protagonists, each with their own intro and story threads, and then explore the world in basically any order you choose. Combat uses Saga's signature Gladiolus Spark system, meaning characters can suddenly discover new skills mid-battle, adding this exciting unpredictability to encounters. Party builds feel genuinely personal because weapon types, magic paths, and formations all change how you fight. The story leans into political intrigue, ancient prophecies, and a strange cataclysm tied to the rise of a new ruler, but it never forces you down one route. It's a cult classic JRPG through and through, quirky, deep, and rewarding for players who enjoy experimentation over strict linearity. Deflector is one of those roguelites where you start off thinking, oh cool, twin-stick shooter, and then suddenly you're parrying bullet swarms like some kind of sci-fi Jedi. The whole hook is in the title. You don't just dodge projectiles, you literally deflect them back at enemies. And the game builds an entire combat system around that mechanic, turning every encounter into this stylish dance of timing, angles, and controlled chaos. As you progress, you unlock mutated skill trees that drastically change your build, ricocheting shots, explosive counters, orbiting blades, chain lightning, and all sorts of wild combos. Levels are quick but intense, enemy patterns are fun to learn, and bosses hit that sweet spot between challenging and fair. The visual style is sleek neon biotech, almost like fighting inside a weaponized immune system. If you love fast, snappy action with tons of build experimentation, especially if Hades rewired your brain, Deflector is absolutely worth your time. Ender Lilies is hauntingly beautiful, a somber, melancholic Metroidvania that pairs tight combat with a genuinely emotional story. You play as Lily, a quiet priestess awakening in a ruined kingdom drowning in cursed rain. She can't fight herself. Instead, she summons fallen warriors who lend her their abilities, creating an ever-growing arsenal of melee strikes, magic bursts, lunging attacks, and defensive counters. The combat feels crisp and deliberate, very Souls-inspired, with bosses that are challenging but incredibly rewarding once you learn their patterns. Exploration is equally satisfying. Sprawling maps, hidden relics, optional guardians, and secrets tucked into every corner of the beautifully hand-drawn world. The soundtrack deserves its own award. Soft piano, mournful strings, and atmospheric tones that make every area feel sacred and tragic. It's one of those games that sticks with you long after the credits roll, especially if you love emotional world building mixed with graceful, satisfying action. Metal-Max Xeno Reborn is an oddball in the best way, a post-apocalyptic JRPG where tanks matter just as much as your party members. In fact, half the fun is customizing your ride, swapping treads, bolting on cannons, collecting absurd weapons, and turning your vehicle into a wandering fortress. You explore a ruined Tokyo wasteland, fighting giant beasts, mech horrors, and rogue AIs, switching between on-foot combat and tank battles depending on the situation. The open-ish zones encourage wandering, scavenging parts, and ambushing enemies for loot. The tone is wonderfully weird. A lone hero, a dog companion who can fire machine guns, and a cast of eccentric survivors trying to rebuild something resembling hope. The Reborn version reworks systems from the original release, speeding up battles, modernizing movement, and making tank customization way easier to understand. It's quirky, grindy in a satisfying way, and absolutely perfect for players who want a JRPG that does things very differently. Goblin Sword is a pure nostalgic treat, the kind of side-scrolling action platformer that feels like it escaped from the golden age of the SNES, but without any of the clunky bits. You play as a tiny hero slicing through colorful, monster-filled stages packed with treasures, secret rooms, and optional challenges. Each level is short and punchy, making this the perfect one more stage before bed kind of game, except you'll probably clear 10. The controls are buttery smooth, with precise jumps and quick sword swipes that make movement feel effortless. What really sells it is the collectible hunt. Hidden crystals, chests, alternate paths, and gear pieces that reward curiosity. The aesthetic is bright, cheerful fantasy rather than grim dark, which makes it super relaxing to play, even when bosses start throwing patterns that keep you on your toes. It's tiny, affordable, and ridiculously charming. A bite-sized adventure that proves simple design done well can still feel magical. Fantasian Neo Dimension is a gorgeous, heartfelt JRPG from Final Fantasy creator Hironobu Sakaguchi, and it absolutely feels like a spiritual cousin to classic Final Fantasy, but with a modern twist. The standout feature? Every environment is a real handcrafted diorama photographed and turned into a playable map, giving the world this rich, tactile storybook vibe. Combat uses the Dimension system, letting you store random encounters for later and fight them all at once in a strategic burst, which keeps exploration flowing without constant interruptions. The story leans into sweeping fantasy drama with emotional twists, lovable characters, and a beautiful soundtrack by Nobuo Uematsu that hits you right in the nostalgia. Despite its mobile origins, the Switch version feels like a polished console RPG, refined controls, enhanced visuals, and quality of life improvements that make the journey smoother. If you're craving an old-school JRPG flavor delivered with modern presentation and big heart, Fantasian is a must-play.
Then what are we waiting for? Let's go to the God Realm.
Vengeful Guardian Moonrider is a stylish love letter to 16-bit action games. Think Shinobi meets Mega Man X with a dash of dystopian anime flair. You play as Moonrider, a cybernetic super soldier breaking free from a totalitarian regime, slicing through enemies with lightning-fast strikes and acrobatic movement. Levels are tight, varied, and full of retro charm. Motorcycle chases, vertical climbs, factory gauntlets, and boss fights that feel like Saturday afternoon arcade challenges. The controls are incredibly responsive, letting you chain air kicks, dashes, and special moves with silky precision. As you defeat bosses, you unlock new abilities that expand your toolkit, giving it that classic build your loadout as you progress arcade feel. The CRT sharp pixel art and crunchy synth soundtrack tie it all together into a stylish, moody atmosphere. It's short but super replayable, rewarding skillful play and speedrun style mastery. If you miss the glory days of fast, focused action platformers, this one absolutely delivers. Chained Echoes is one of those rare indie RPGs that feels like someone bottled the spirit of SNES classics and injected it with modern pacing and storytelling. You get airships, mechs, political intrigue, ancient magic, basically every JRPG flavor you could want, but executed with shocking polish. Combat is where it truly shines. The overdrive meter creates this push-pull tension where using the right moves at the right time gives huge bonuses, but spamming abilities can push you into danger. It keeps every fight engaging and tactical. The pixel art world is stunning, full of detailed towns, lush forests, and moody ruins that feel alive. And the story? Surprisingly grounded for a fantasy game, focusing on characters dealing with war, guilt, and messy alliances rather than simple hero tropes. It's long, richly written, and constantly surprising without ever bloating itself. If you crave a modern classic JRPG, this is easily one of the best hidden gems on the Switch. Unsighted is a fast, tense, emotional action-adventure game set in a ruined cyberpunk city where time is literally running out for everyone. You play as Alma, an android warrior racing to save her friends before they lose consciousness and become mindless, unsighted foes. The timer mechanic adds a nerve-wracking twist. NPCs will actually die or disappear if you ignore them too long. But here's the thing, it's never stressful in a bad way. Instead, it pushes you to explore smartly, make meaningful choices, and sometimes sacrifice upgrades to save characters you care about. Combat is quick and technical with perfect parries, dodges, dual-wielded weapons, and customizable chips that tune your entire build. The world design is pure Metroidvania goodness. Shortcuts, hidden items, big hubs, but wrapped in a top-down style that feels refreshing. And emotionally, it hits harder than you'd expect from a pixel cyber future. Hugely underrated, beautifully designed, and unforgettable. The Live Alive Remake is one of Square Enix's boldest revivals, a full HD 2D remake of a cult SNES classic that most players outside Japan never got to experience until now. Its structure is wonderfully unique, 7 distinct stories across different time periods, each with its own gameplay twist. One minute you're a ninja stealthing through feudal Japan, the next you're solving mysteries in the Wild West, brawling in modern-day tournaments, or exploring distant sci-fi futures. The remake's visuals are stunning, blending 3D lighting with 2D sprites to create a storybook world full of depth and color. Combat uses a grid-based system that's simple to learn but wildly flexible, letting you position attacks, manipulate enemy movement, and chain abilities in clever ways. What makes it unforgettable is how all these separate tales weave into a finale that hits with real emotional weight. It's experimental, heartfelt, and one of the Switch's best narrative showcases.
Lend me courage! So it's not over, huh?
And there you have it, 30 incredible Switch hidden gems just waiting to steal your free time. Which one are you grabbing first? Drop your pick in the comments and hit subscribe so you never miss the next cozy Nintendo deep dive.